An anthology of readings of Almighty God's words. To have an unchanged disposition is to be an enmity to God. After several thousand years of corruption, man has become numb and dull-witted, a demon that opposes God, to the extent that man's rebelliousness toward God has been documented in the books of history. And even man himself is incapable of giving a full account of his rebellious behavior. For man has been profoundly corrupted by Satan, and has been led astray by Satan, that he knows not where to turn. Even today, man still betrays God. When man sees God, he betrays him. And when he cannot see God, so too does he betray him. There are even those who, having witnessed God's curses and God's wrath, still betray him. And so I say that man's sense has lost its original function, and that man's conscience, too, has lost its original function. The man that I look upon is a beast in human attire. He is a venomous snake, and no matter how pitiable he tries to appear before my eyes, I will never be merciful toward him. For man has no grasp of the difference between black and white, of the difference between truth and non-truth. Man's sense is so benumbed, yet he still wishes to gain blessings. His humanity is so ignoble, yet he still wishes to possess the sovereignty of a king. Who could he be the king of, with sense such as that? How could he, with such a humanity, sit atop a throne? Man truly has no shame. He is a conceited wretch. For those of you who wish to gain blessings, I suggest you first find a mirror and look at your own ugly reflection. Do you have what it takes to be a king? Do you have the face of one who could gain blessings? There has not been the slightest change in your disposition, and you have not put any of the truth into practice, yet you still wish for a wonderful tomorrow. You're deluding yourself. Born into such a filthy land, man has been severely blighted by society. He has been influenced by feudal ethics, and he has been taught at institutes of higher learning. The backward thinking, corrupt morality, mean view on life, despicable philosophy, utterly worthless existence, and depraved lifestyle and customs, all of these things have severely intruded upon man's heart, and severely undermined and attacked his conscience. As a result, man is ever more distant from God, and ever more opposed to him. Man's disposition becomes more vicious by the day, and there is not a single person who will willingly give up anything for God, not a single person who will willingly obey God, nor, moreover, a single person who will willingly seek the appearance of God. Instead, under the domain of Satan, man does nothing but pursue pleasure, giving himself over to the corruption of the flesh in the land of mud. Even when they hear the truth, those who live in darkness give no thought to putting it into practice, nor are they inclined to seek out God, even if they have beheld his appearance. How could a mankind so depraved have any chance of salvation? How could a mankind so decadent live in the light? Man's disposition should be changed, starting from the knowledge of his substance and through changes in his thinking, nature, and mental outlook, through fundamental changes. Only in this way will true changes be achieved in the disposition of man. Man's corrupt disposition stems from his being poisoned and trampled upon by Satan, from the egregious harm that Satan has inflicted upon his thinking, morality, insight, and sense. It is precisely because these fundamental things of man have been corrupted by Satan and are utterly unlike how God originally created them that man opposes God and does not understand the truth. Thus, changes in man's disposition should begin with changes in his thinking, insight, and sense that will change his knowledge of God and his knowledge of the truth. Those who were born in the most deeply corrupted of all lands are even more ignorant of what God is, or what it means to believe in God. The more corrupted people are, the less they know the existence of God, and the poorer their sense and insight. The source of man's opposition and rebelliousness against God is his corruption by Satan. Because he has been corrupted by Satan, man's conscience has grown numb. He is immoral, his thoughts are degenerate, and he has a backward mental outlook. Before he was corrupted by Satan, man originally followed God and obeyed his words. He was originally of sound sense and conscience, and of normal humanity. After being corrupted by Satan, his original sense, conscience, and humanity grew dull and were impaired by Satan. Thus, he has lost his obedience and love toward God. Man's sense has become aberrant. His disposition has become the same as that of an animal, and his rebelliousness toward God is ever more frequent and grievous. Yet man still neither knows nor recognizes this, and merely blindly opposes and rebels. The revelation of man's disposition is the expression of his sense, insight, and conscience. And because his sense and insight are unsound, and his conscience has grown supremely dull, thus his disposition is rebellious against God. If man's sense and insight cannot change, then changes in his disposition are out of the question, as is being after God's heart. If man's sense is unsound, then he cannot serve God and is unfit for use by God. Normal sense refers to obeying and being faithful to God, to yearning for God, to being unequivocal toward God, and to having a conscience toward God. It refers to being of one heart and mind toward God, and not deliberately opposing God. Those who are of an aberrant sense are not like this. Since man was corrupted by Satan, he has produced conceptions about God, and he has had no loyalty or yearning for God, to say nothing of a conscience toward God. Man deliberately opposes and passes judgments on God, and furthermore hurls invective at him behind his back. Man clearly knows he is God, yet still passes judgments on him behind his back, has no intention of obeying him, and merely makes blind demands and requests of God. Such people who have aberrant sense, are incapable of knowing their own despicable behavior or of regretting their rebelliousness. If people are capable of knowing themselves, then they have regained a little of their sense. The more people are rebellious against God, but do not know themselves, the more they are of unsound sense. The source of the revelation of man's corrupt disposition is nothing more than his dulled conscience, his malicious nature, and his unsound sense. If man's conscience and sense are able to return to normal, then he will become fit for use before God. It is simply because man's conscience has always been numb. Man's sense has never been sound and is increasingly dull, that man is increasingly rebellious toward God, such that he even nailed Jesus to the cross and has refused God incarnate of the last days entry into his home, and condemns God's flesh, and sees God's flesh as vile and lowly. If man had but a little humanity, he would not be so cruel in his treatment of God become flesh. If he had but a little sense, he would not be so vicious in his treatment of the flesh of God incarnate. If he had but a little conscience, he would not be so grateful to God incarnate in this way. Man lives in the era of God become flesh, yet he is incapable of thanking God for giving him such a good opportunity, and instead curses the coming of God, or completely ignores the fact of God's incarnation, and is seemingly against it and weary of it. Regardless of how man treats the coming of God, God, in short, has always carried on with his work regardless, even though man has not been the slightest bit welcoming toward him and blindly makes requests of him. Man's disposition has become supremely vicious. His sense has grown supremely dull, and his conscience has been completely trampled by the evil one, and long ago ceased to be the original conscience of man. Man is not only ungrateful to God incarnate for bestowing so much life and grace upon mankind, but has even become resentful toward God for giving him the truth. It is because man has not the slightest interest in the truth that he is resentful toward God. Not only is man unable to lay down his life for God incarnate, but he also tries to extract favors from him and makes demands of God that are dozens of times greater than what man has given to God. People of such conscience and sense take all this as a given and still believe that they have expended so much for God, and that God has given them too little. There are people who have given me a bowl of water, yet held out their hands and demanded the equivalent of 2 bowls of milk, or have given me a room for one night, but tried to charge me many times more in accommodation fees. With such a humanity and such a conscience, how could you still wish to gain life? What contemptible wretches you are! It is because of this humanity and conscience of man that God incarnate wanders across the land, with no place to find shelter. Those who are truly possessed of conscience and humanity should worship and wholeheartedly serve God incarnate, not because of how much work he has done, but even if he were to do no work at all. This is what should be done by those who are of sound sense, and it is the duty of man. Most people even speak of conditions in their service to God. They do not care whether he is God or a man, and they only talk of their own conditions and only pursue the achievement of their own desires. When you cook for me, you demand chef's fees. When you run for me, you ask for running fees. When you work for me, you demand work fees. When you wash my clothes, you demand laundry fees. When you provide for the church, you demand recuperation costs. When you speak, you demand speaker's fees. When you give out books, you demand distribution fees. And when you write, you demand writing fees. Those I have dealt with even demand recompense from me, while those who have been sent home demand reparations for the damage to their name. Those who are unmarried demand a dowry or compensation for their lost youth. Those who kill a chicken demand butcher's fees. Those who fry food demand frying fees. And those who make soup demand payment for that too. This is your lofty and mighty humanity, and these are the actions dictated by your warm conscience. Where is your sense? Where is your humanity? Let me tell you, if you carry on like this, I will cease to work among you. I will not work among a pack of beasts in human attire. I will not suffer thus for such a group of people whose fair face hides a feral heart. I will not endure for such a pack of animals that has not the slightest possibility of salvation. The day I turn my back on you is the day you die. It is the day that darkness comes upon you, and the day that you are forsaken by the light. Let me tell you, I will never be benevolent to a group such as yours, a group which is beneath even animals. There are limits to my words and actions, and with your humanity and conscience as they are, I will do no more work, for you are too lacking in conscience. You have caused me too much pain, and your despicable behavior disgusts me too much. People who are so lacking in humanity and conscience will never have the chance of salvation. I would never save such heartless and ungrateful people. When my day comes, I will rain down my scorching flames for all eternity upon the children of disobedience that once provoked my fierce wrath. I will impose my everlasting punishment upon those animals that once hurled invective at me and forsook me. I will burn for all time with the fires of my anger the sons of disobedience that once ate and lived together with me, but did not believe in me, and insulted and betrayed me. I will subject all those who provoked my anger to my punishment. I will rain down the entirety of my anger upon those beasts that once wished to stand shoulder to shoulder with me, yet did not worship or obey me. The rod with which I strike man will fall upon those animals who once enjoyed my care and the mysteries that I spoke, and who tried to take material enjoyments from me. I will be forgiving of no person who tries to take my place. I will spare none of those who attempt to wrest food and clothes from me. For now, you remain free from harm and continue to overreach yourselves in the demands you make of me. When the day of wrath arrives, you will not make any more demands of me, At that time, I will let you enjoy yourselves to your heart's content. I will force your face into the earth, and you will never be able to get up again. Sooner or later, I am going to repay this debt to you, and I hope you patiently await the arrival of this day. If these contemptible beings can truly set aside their extravagant desires and return to God, then they still have the chance of salvation. If man has a heart that truly yearns for God, then he will not be abandoned by God. Man fails to gain God not because God has emotion or because God is unwilling to be gained by man, but because man does not want to gain God, and because man does not urgently seek God. How could one of those who truly seek God be cursed by God? How could one of sound sense and sensitive conscience be cursed by God? How could one who truly worships and serves God be consumed by the fires of his wrath? How could one who is happy to obey God be kicked out of God's house? How could one who could not love God enough live in God's punishment? How could someone who is happy to forsake everything for God be left with nothing? Man is unwilling to pursue God, unwilling to spend his belongings for God, and unwilling to devote a lifetime's effort to God, and instead says that God has gone too far, that too much about God is at odds with man's conceptions. With a humanity like this, even if you were unstinting in your efforts, you would still be unable to gain God's approval, to say nothing of the fact that you don't seek God. Do you not know that you are the defective goods of mankind? Do you not know that no humanity is more lowly than yours? Do you not know what your title is? Those who truly love God call you the father of the wolf, the mother of the wolf, the son of the wolf, and the grandson of the wolf. You are the descendants of the wolf, the people of the wolf, and you should know your own identity and never forget it. Do not think that you are some superior figure. You are the most vicious group of non-humans among mankind. Do you not know any of this? Do you know how much of a risk I have taken to work among you? If your sense cannot return to normal, and your conscience cannot work normally, then you will never be free of the wolf appellation. You will never escape the day of curse, will never escape the day of your punishment. You were born inferior, a thing without any worth. You are inherently a pack of hungry wolves, a pile of debris and rubbish. And, unlike you, I do not work upon you in order to gain favors, but because of the need of work. If you carry on being rebellious in this way, then I will stop my work and will never work upon you again. On the contrary, I will transfer my work to another group that pleases me, and in this way will leave you forever, because I am unwilling to look upon those who are in enmity to me. So, then, do you wish to be compatible with me, or in enmity against me?